Freestanding.
Well, welcome everybody here to our final session of the Restore Festival of the 7th Annual Tony Wyatt History.
Oh, the mic guy.
The mic isn't on.
Oh, okay, I'll get close here. So welcome to the final summer session of the 7th Annual Tony Wyatt History Festival. And this is sponsored by the Washburn Heritage Association and the Washburn Area Historical Society. Here's a big thankful to the Apostle Islands Historic Preservation Conservancy, who's funding this summer series. We're delighted to have musician Warren Nelson here for this evening. Thank you to Ken and Gene Weiler, who are sponsoring his music. There'll also be a 10-minute intermission. It's about halfway through here when you can get up and move around, get a drink and some of the refreshments. And also, if you haven't filled out it's the survey, please take the time to do so if you haven't. Okay, we're excited to have Warren Nelson here. Just read, Warren has been here since, I think they came in 1980, and they established Chautauqua. And one of their first songs was Souvenir Views. Yeah. So, but I'll read here. Let's see. Lake Superior Big Top Chautauqua founder, impresario, and host Warren Nelson brings to the stage his 23 years of being top hat of this Wisconsin treasure tent show, where his wit, his humor, and songwriting and pen stood at the center pole of Chautauqua's shows. So please welcome Warren Nelson.
I don't know, I heard you, if you're a local here, you have to have your great-grandfather be born. Which I think some people are here tonight. I got Otis with me, he's back there getting the music shut off. But I want to welcome him and you and thank you for coming tonight. And I really want to mention Tony Wyatt's name again because I love Tony and I got to know him first in 1983 when Betty and I, Freddie Ferris and I did Souvenir Views. Of course, Tony was Mr. Washburn History. Over and over. I especially like his book of nicknames of all the people in Washburn. And those goofy movies he made near the end of his life. Those are really wonderful. I'm proud to be here tonight and tell you a little story. Long ago, before the radio, the automobile would do. Wasn't a lot to do in this one-horse town I grew up next to. Work off shooting. And a little after 1905, long green summers came alive. One grand week a year, top was big top, rose in the air. We got up before the sun, did the chores. We dressed in our Sunday duds and piled in the family Ford. We drove the dusty road, chugging into town, off to the Chautauqua grounds. You know, we set our camp for the week with a chance to meet your neighbors and make new friends. Didn't have to say goodbye at the end, just say first time we ever seen such drama. We never heard such music played. And the singers were all so professional. You should have heard the speeches those speakers made. We sat there day and night, night and day. We went every afternoon and every matinee. We sat up straight and we paid attention. We fooled around Chautauqua grounds. Evening at Chautauqua, the old canvas tent show stage. Most American thing in America until a new age turned its page. Evening at Chautauqua, over the Midwest up and down. 20 years the big Tom's traveling. 20 years the big Tom's traveling. 20 years big Tom's traveling. The groves of your hometown. Well, that's the history of Chautauqua in a nutshell. It started in 1856 on Lake Chautauqua in Upper New York, and it started by a couple of Methodist ministers who had an idea of having a Bible camp in the summer for adults. So adults started to come to that camp every year, and that was about, that was 1876. I can't remember the date I told you. But that went on, and then someone got the idea to do regional Chautauqua, so they opened some Chautauquas in communities around the country, some of which are still standing. In Boulder, Colorado, there's a Boulder Chautauqua that's been going since the 1890s. And then the turn of the century happened, and a couple of people who were show business, vaudevillian people, decided they're going to do entertainment Chautauquas. They're going to bring a tent to all the communities that they could, mostly in the Midwest, but eventually all over the United States. So let's say I'm a Chautauqua man. Let's say you own a lumber store. Mr. Olson here, let's say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to you and I'm going to say, hey, you know, I'm Warren Nelson and I have a Chautauqua show. We're going to come to Washburn. We're going to pitch it out there in the grass, and I want you to help support us, give me some money, and the bankers and everybody chip in. And that way Chautauqua traveled around the Midwest especially, doing a 7 or 10-day show. And just like I said in the song, these people, this is for radio, these people had never seen a professional orchestra, rarely seen professional singers, and it was a quite big phenomenon. Radio killed Chautauqua in the 1920s, because then, instead of having to wait to see someone come and see somebody in person, you could turn the knob. There was some of the greatest entertainment anywhere. So anyway, here's another song you might have heard. I can't believe another year going around. Is that a big time to see their line on the ground? Ballyhoo, oh Ballyhoo. There wasn't but a woman then a week ago. About 9 a.m. the volunteers began to show. Ballyhoo, oh Ballyhoo. 5 big top bag rolling in the sun. side pole, don't you look cool? Just like an oversized swimming pool, Ballyhoo. Oh, Ballyhoo. Up with the quarter pole, see how she bends. Time off for lunch, a little chat with your friends. Ballyhoo. Oh, Ballyhoo. Up roll the trusses and the center poles. It's all uphill, it won't be long now. Ballyhoo. Oh, Ballyhoo. Pardon me while I stop and stare. That's the most beautiful thing I ever seen in the air. Ballyhoo. Oh, Ballyhoo. Look, she top potential pack a double. Let's go 8:15 old circus stop. Never seen such a sight on the sweet summer night. All canvas music, manatee light, it big, it blue. Big top show, top of me and you. Ballyhoo. Ballyhoo. Well, I don't have to memorize anything because in 2011 I wrote a book called Ballyhoo, Backstage, Big Top, and this is how I'm telling the story tonight. And by the way, I have $16 in my basement. I bought some boxes here tonight, and they're back there, and please take one or two or however many you want to. If you'd like to throw in a couple bucks in the jar, it goes to this beautiful series of history program. So here it is anyway. And we'll just start. We'll start BC before Chautauqua. I tell this story here, which is outside the Big Top ring, because it's a Bayfield tale, and if things had worked out in the end, perhaps there never would have been a Big Top Chautauqua. In fact, I'm certain of it. The year is 1982, and the Lost Nation String Band is gigging every summer, Sunday nights at Bates Bar in Bayfield. Those were the days live music had only a few homes on the peninsula, and in Bayfield, Bates Bar quickly became a hot spot. This classy bar was jumping every weekend. Mary Rice remodeled it, setting up with a stage and dance floor. By the way, I sanded the dance floor. Varnished it, just to throw that in. It's Sunday night after the gig. Don Pavljak, Douglas, and I finished packing up. We were walking down Rittenhouse Avenue with the two bartenders and a couple employees to Goldman's Cafe. Who remembers it? Unbelievably, it's open 24 hours. Musician's dream. It's now well past 2 o'clock a.m. We passed the Harbor Theater, which was built in 1942 as a movie house, one floor seating of around a couple hundred. On the billboard out front is noticed that Song of the South, the Uncle Rebus animated Walt Disney movie, is now playing. 2 shows Friday and Saturday, 7 and 9. Ba-dee-doo-da. I'm thinking as I'm walking across the street, oh, I'd love to see that again. We are more than a little beard up and put in our order. Don has always asked for gravy on his french fries. Hey, I asked, who owns this joint? I want to see the movie now. One of the employees answers, Grub. Grub Walksmith owns it. And he loves to make a buck. Hence a nickname, I guess. Well, I put in a $20 bill on the table. Who's in? Maybe he'll do it. Now past 3 a.m. Bills start piling at the center of the table. I throw in 10 more. We're up to $78. Now 80. Now 90. Laughter abounds. Where's he live? He lives 2 blocks up, just a half a block from Bates. I'll call him. Where's the nearest phone? There's a phone down by the bank. So 6 or 7 of us are parading down the middle of the street singing zippity-doo-dah, zippity, my oh my. I scan down to the W's and find Walksmith Larry. That's him. I dropped 35 cents in the phone booth. Remember phone booths? A woman answers in a half voice. Hello? Hello, this is Warren Nelson. Is Grub there? You mean Brub? Uh-oh. Yeah, Brub, just a minute. Why in the world didn't she hang up? 30 seconds travels by. I'm fearless. Hello? Brub, this is Warren Nelson. This is not a crank call. Let me cut the quick before you hang up. Couple unawake sighs, breathe into the phone. Brub, I have a small crowd here who wants to see Song of the South. Silence. Mr. Walksmith, I know this sounds insane, but we'd like to see it now. Silence. We have $94, and we'd love if you'd open the theater and play the movie. Brub, you know it's Bayfield's 125th anniversary as a town, and something like this only happens every 125 years. Silence. Now? Now. want to see it, Brub. Longer sentence. Give me 15 minutes. Thanks, Brub. I really mean that. To make a short story longer, Brub tells us to meet him at the quarter where he lives. We need beer. One of the bartenders opens Bates, and we take a case of bottled in hand, walking towards the corner of Brub's house. Not a car on the street, houses up and down the hill are all dark. The street lights swirling with insects. Tippity-doo-dah. 15 minutes later, Brub walks Smith, a tall, lanky man I instantly like, walks out his front door and crosses the street to meet us. Brub, I'm Warren. This is stupendous, Brub. He is not smiling. Not frowning as he looks at me and says, no popcorn. We follow him to the theater, respectfully grinning. A click of the key and the door opens in the small lobby. Brub turns on the lights, shakes his head and gives a little laugh. I hand him $94. He takes the stairs to the projection booth and we stagger a bit down the aisle to the front row, reaching for beers. One of the highlights of my life is here. I'm thinking one of those once in a lifetime, the grand spontaneous idea coming to immediate life. Brub is loading the movie. I see him through the little window up above. Thank you, Brub, I yell from the front row. We spread out in the seats for a private showing. Sunlight swirls the room. All of a sudden, Bayfield's police officer, a woman, enters. It's 3 a.m. now. She asks sharply from the back of the house, what's going on here? I turn and lift a beer towards her. We're waiting for the feature. Brub, are you up there? Yeah. You're welcome to stay, officer, I say as she leaves. It's precisely now 4 a.m. The lights dim and the sound of a 35mm film rolls from on high, cartoons and all. I love this movie, not having seen it for a year. No popcorn. Let's see here. For 23 years, I was the centerpole of the greatest venue in the history of the universe, Lake Superior, Big Top, Chautauqua. Being host of the stage shows, the 10-show radio, creator and co-creator of the original musicals, and resident writer, man of the cloth. But the story of its founding in 1986 and the dream is much older than that. As a young lad, I ran county fairs in southern Minnesota thanks to my late great dad, Alvin Nelson, who was the dairy equipment salesman, helped out set up the dairy barn for the week-run fairs. Those were the Martin County Three-Gate Fair, the Faribault County Fair, and the Jackson County Fair. In the summer glory, we'd arrive on setup day at dawn and stay the week. While he dealt in his friendly manner with the farmers and fairgoers, I would pass out brochures for him, and he'd give me pocket money to wander the days and nights of the bright carny lights from morning to closing time. It was then and there in those years that I learned to love the bright lights of fun and the smell of canvas and sawdust. It was a yearly visit we also played to the Minnesota State Fair, the grandest of all the lights. Those transfusions of pure joy never left my blood in the years after, applying the promise that one day I would have a tent show of my own. Run away with the carnival or the circus. I was 14. I woke up as a teenager to the gift of being a born songwriter, entertainer, quit college and ran away with show groups into the 60s and 70s. As for the art of learning, entertaining, and storytelling, I give my mom, Clestel Gillespie Nelson, the tip of the hat of my career. She was a natural. In the years of my kidhood, Gillespie Beauty Shop in Fairmont was a hen house of chatter and laughter. It was a family business with my grandmother, Effie, my Aunt Delma, and Mom, cackling away all day. It was a school of comedy for little me. Little wonder, I loved the stage. It was a music circus I was given an opportunity to put in the air on Mount Asher, based out of Bayfield, Wisconsin. Reading the great tradition of tent shows, I came across the story of Chautauqua. Grand idea founded in New York in 1874. They inspired the birth of circuit Chautauquas, which spread all across America. Teddy Roosevelt called it the most American thing in America. Faith, higher power, what's over the hill? One summer morning in 1984, on my driving way up 8th Avenue in Washburn, 1984, I pulled over on a yard sale sign after the ending around the table, and finding nothing to add to my rat pack, I began to travel back to my car. The way out was along the garage, and there in the grass lay a single tent pole. It was well worn, 10 feet long, 6-sided. Here it is. Kept that baby. From 1984, 2 years BC. Where in this world did that come from? From a circus that played in Cut Town years ago, the sellers had no idea this is not your camping tent pole. This is a sidewalk. I picked it up, laughed. How much? $3. I didn't pick her. I stood there, took it home, stood it up. My forgotten dream of someday having a tent show suddenly rose in the air of my heart and yard. This was, by the set of a birth, before Chautauqua was even a gleam in the eye. 18 months later, after a chat with Mary Rice, she invited me to her home to discuss the stupendous idea of building a theater, to make a home stage for shows like Riding the Wind, for musicians like the boys of the Lost Station String Band, a venue for the Bayfield Peninsula. I invited Sally Kessler to come along. I respected her knowledge of theater and thought the idea might come to include all the possibilities of a new stage. I told Betty Ferris the tent show was what I had in mind and carried the word Chautauqua to the meeting. There on the couch, I had my say. Though I didn't speak it as such, my ballot was, Mary, don't buy me a stinking theater. Buy me a tent. They did. The Mayhead Foundation, Mary's parents, Bill and Betty Hewlings, sweetest of the sweet people and generous with their giving to the arts around St. Paul. I've been asked many a time, did you ever think it would become so big? My answer was, to start big, it was a big idea with big shows, with a big top, with a big cast. We didn't have time to think. We had to move, asked Carolyn Sneed. Meeting Mary was in 1986, and the first show of performance of Riding the Wind opened July 11th of that year, 8:15. Old circus time. Tom Johnson, my lawyer friend and occasional guest, MC, once declared from the stage, well, I heard they were putting a big tent up at a ski hill playing historic musicals all summer. Boy, that's gonna work. First tent. I went to a party June 1986 at Dave and Joy Ricard's in Washburn, knowing our tent was on its way from Minneapolis in a sheep trailer delivered by Ken Spotnick. He said he'd drop it off at Mount Asher Bay and would be there early evening. About 6:30, I left the party, headed to the hill, no one around. Wonder the world, there lay 5 big top canvas bags, monsters of the Midway, rolled up and wrapped in gray. The big dream of mine was about to unroll. Delight beyond joy. I stepped to the bags and untied one, felt the canvas duck. It had the sniff of a 100-year-old circus. The brittle green rope, braids, blue and gray white stripe, a big top. So this is how they are packed and hauled. It was a well-used Danville, all canvas square ender we bought for $3,500 from RC Party Rentals in Minneapolis. Soon to become great friend and fellow roustabout Paul Buckles, expert tent man with RC, was engaged to come up and oversee the raising and bring what we needed. Sidewalls were ordered at 10 feet. The normal height for a sidewall is 7 or 8 feet. Remember the pole I had discovered 2 years earlier? Raise it! Center poles, side poles, quarter poles, stakes were ordered through Paul and RC, brand new sidewalls in royal blue. We were on the way for the great day. Somehow I found God was remodeling a Lutheran church in North Minneapolis, and a host of padded church pews, mostly 24 feet long, were for sale. I said yes without hesitation. 2 semis with flatbeds were loaded with pews, pumped by my brother and his Twin Cities pal. I'll never forget, I was gassing up at Lano's when the 2 trucks driving the pews came by. I said, yeah, man, we're on our way. Paul was sleeping in his truck when I arrived the morning of the raising. We shook hands and hit it off immediately. I often wondered why he thought of this crazy brave idea of mine. Over time, he told me that no one was betting on such a scheme to last long. Jerry Carlson walked up from his house. Carolyn arrived. The roustabouts began to drive in, and we were off. I had blown my wild enthusiasm all spring long into the ears of Jonathan Felkin, a sailor who knew the ropes. Paul and Jonathan led the way as they continued to do the first few years at every tent raising. They were my canvas men. In tent lore, the canvas man is boss. Jerry Carlson was the third main man, Jerry being a man of many astute mechanical talents. Put the late Noel Meyer on that list. Noel was our light man, a technician from day one. In the early years, he made do with what we could afford for lights. He was always, every day, always at the tent, his children in tow. We pulled out the top, laid the 5 sections in order, listened as Paul taught us how to lay the poles out, and then the sound now long forgotten at BTC, the driving of steel stakes by a sledgehammer, as it had been done for ages. We got into the 3-man rhythm on one stake, 3 hammers bringing steel, the anvil chorus. There was a pure joy in the mystery unveiled, the big hat going up. You learned the clove hitch to tension the ropes from stake to top. As in great circus tradition, I placed a penny under the last center pole to raise a wish for good fortune, fair weather, and straw houses. My goodness. You doing okay up there? If you have any questions when I'm doing this babbling up here, just shout them out. Okay. Let's see. Okay, here we go. I'll never forget this. The entire first season was an adventure. Looking up at the top of the right side, one could see constellations of light breaking through it. It leaked. It was an old town. We covered many of the pews with plastic every night in anticipation of rain, and it rained, and it began to rain, and word began to get around about the hippies on the hill and their crazy goings on. What's Chautauqua mean? How do you spell it? Chautauqua on Squamish Bay? We opened July 11, 1986 with Riding the Wind. The band stage was the ground. The big screen was in place. To adapt the tent for visuals, I followed the idea of what was known in the old tent show days as dramatic end tents. A dramatic end tent removes the end center pole and cables and ropes the top to hold it up, allowing an unobstructed space for the stage. In our case, we needed to give a clear shot for rear projection. To play it safe, for the every worry of insurance, we had a trust engineered by a firm in Ashland. I'll never forget this. It was aluminum steel, huge gizmo that was over the requirement for support by at least 1 million pounds. It lasted, I think, 2 years before Jonathan designed a wooden truss, which was used for a good many years. Our friends took tickets, t-shirts, and sold tickets. Mom and Dad were there. $5 a ticket for the first year. Good old days. A defining moment came on a wild, wind-driven night. Is Jerry Carlson here?
Yes, it is.
Carol Carlson is here? Yeehaw! Carol and Steve is here. Let me tell you, the people are with me from the top of our show tonight. Finally came on a wild, wind-driven, rainy night when I had booked a one-man show from Minneapolis. It was a dramatic portrait of Edwin Booth. Every Tuesday night we used to do lecture nights. We'd bring a poet. Some nights we'd have slide jams. You'd bring your own pictures and get up on the screen and tell us about your trip to New Zealand. We brought Howard Sievertson, who was a famous painter. We brought Robert Bly. We brought Paul Shirky, who went to the North Pole. You remember? With Will Steger. And this is a true story. It was in early June. He brought his lead dog. And when the show started, it was probably about 59 degrees. And by the intermission, it was 28. I'll never forget that. So the act, only a few, it was really raining. The dramatic portrait of Edwin Booth, a famous American actor of long ago. Only a few people bought tickets. The actor approached me saying, canceling the show would be okay. I mean, it was pouring. It was raining in the tent, and the poles were shaking like mass. The temperature leaned towards sleep. No, I said, we never cancel, the show must go on. He set up his throne, and Carolyn and I gave notice. Jerry and Carol Carlson came in. Our crew was there. Big Top, regular patron, Norman, Judith, and Eric Larson were there. We all huddled in the first 2 rows, all 11 of us, wearing rain gear head to toe for 2 hours and leaned our ears to the stage. We gave him a shivering standing ovation and swam home. That night remained at the apex of all my Big Top experiences. You had to be there, but you weren't. Another grand moment I give you, a very elderly couple came to a show. That night it rained 5 inches. Rivers and their tributaries rolled through the tent. I had welcomed the couple before the show and noticed the proud way he presented the tent to his wife. He unfolded his arms as if welcoming royalty to the palace, pointed to the sound system, pointed up at the top, gestured to the pews. We called the show early after warning the crowd not to touch the steel center poles. Lightning was seeking the hill. We pulled cars up to the exit, lights on, to allow customers to see their way out. The tent was now empty except Standing inside the tent was the elderly couple, soaking wet, wild-eyed as I've ever seen humans. I wondered and smiled at them. I was having the time of my life. "What are you doing here?" I asked. The gentleman looked at me. "We could die here." No, man. You had to be there. 5,000 plus people attended during our first season of 40 shows. Tickets for $5 apiece. We ran 7 weeks, August 31. On closing night, the Bayfield Chamber of Commerce awarded us congratulations on this new enterprise that was up off its knees and standing up. Our offices were wherever we found ourselves, mostly in our homes. Meetings were held at Carolyn Steed's famous Chautauqua table that surely should be put on the Wisconsin Register of Historic Places. Our business phone was located in my house. For the first few years, to get Chautauqua tickets, you called information 373-5851 at my house. I loved it, but of course, as we grew, everything changed. Okay. Here's a poem. What half the hippies raised on yonder mount aside the green wooded grove, they tenteth up such music as would stain the night air. Hark at their harps, thou old dogs barking like pups for a ticket sold, howling under a Chautauqua moon at the padded pews. Wouldst thee and thou wow the patrons of their purse? And what return for their arrivals? Ah, 'tis a show of live minstrels strumming their lutes and tooting their flutes, with all the stage light of heaven loading their struts as they ride wind and keep light. Who wouldst have notes their success would stay course to the passing summers? Forsooth, the reveling engages the multitudes, each every man attending proclaimeth by bespangled applause the passionate approval. Let's see here. All right, here's one called The Beer Tent, the Big Wind, and the Insurance Man. Get ready. It was the late 1980s, the year the big wind blew across Madeline Island, clocked about 100 miles an hour, a freshwater hurricane. For a tent show man, sitting at home listening to the weather warnings on the radio at night is a nightmare. What are you going to do? Drive up to the tent and pray? Our first new tent was in its second year. The beer tent was 2 seconds of our first tent, an old warrior that was on his last stand. It was a rag. We knew we were due to order new canvas the next year. The wind brought us damage. It could have been devastating, but the ski hill breaks the wind. We were in the lee of the blow. The big top collapsed at the rear to one side. A quarter pole and sidewall poles were broken. Light fixtures at the pole end along the sidewalls were disabled. The new canvas had a tear or two small, could be mended. We were lucky that was it. A day's work and we were set for showtime. The beer tent was not so lucky. Carolyn called our insurance man, agent from Ashland, and assessor was promptly sent over to take a look. I think he was from Duluth. Sitting in the beer tent, I saw him with Carolyn and Phil at the back of the tent, and I let them walk about their business. Above me in the old hang was a huge rip, the old top shredded. I'm thinking there won't be much of a claim here. It's not worth anything. Carolyn, the insurance man with his briefcase, approached the picnic table where I sat. We were introduced, and he began filling out forms. Right above us was the big hole. I pointed, looked up, and said, "This old top is done for, but it is out." Carolyn kicked me as hard as she could under the table. And kicked me again. I shut up and let her kick. And let her talk. "This tent is not repairable," she said. He asked while he was shuffling paper, "Well, what exactly do you do up here?" I said, "Well, we put on shows, original musicals, concerts, lectures, and plays." "Oh," he said, "I've been in a few plays." Carolyn smiled at me with a Cheshire cat grin. I took the look. "Oh," I said, "so you're an actor?" "Yeah, I've done a few plays in college and in Duluth." "Oh, that's interesting. You're a performer?" "Yes, but I mostly am a musician." "You're a musician? What do you play?" "I play bagpipes." "The bagpipes? That's my favorite instrument." I had just discovered bagpipes were my favorite instrument. "I love the bagpipes. I bet you're good." "Well, I've been playing quite a long time." His face was now changing from the insurance man look to a Barney Fife aw shucks look. Carolyn's Cheshire cat grin widened. wow, you play the bagpipes, my favorite instrument. You play the Julian pipes or the type you blow? I play the Highland pipes, the type you blow. Well, I'd sure like to hear you sometime. The bagpipes are my favorite instrument. He was asking what this damaged top was worth. $10,000, Carolyn immediately replied. He wrote that down on a new sheet. Oh, I'd love to hear you play your bagpipes. It's been such a long time since I've heard the bagpipes played by somebody who knows what he's doing. Well, his face was now shiny. He stopped. I just happen to have my bagpipes in the trunk of my car. You travel with your bagpipes? Yes, wow, the bagpipes are my favorite instrument. I'd love to hear you play. Well, okay. He marched to his car with a Scottish Irish step. Carolyn, with her Cheshire cat grin stretched to its limit and her eyes ready to bite down, stood up to follow, and I ran to catch it. Wow, the bagpipes, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. He never heard the question. He was entering a different world. He stood beside the trunk as he assembled the pipes. I wish he'd put on a parade hat, one of those Scottish high barrels with a plume. I was hoping he was going to put on a skirt, one of them kilts. He began to tune the pipes at those drones that could stop a charging dog. When he finished tuning, he took off, marching to the beat of a Scottish air around the grass by the tent. Carolyn Cheshire Cat began to eat up her cheeks. I began to nod my head to the beat of the bagpipe. I should tell you now that the bagpipes are still my favorite instrument. He marched along the sidewalk with his full-blown cheeks huffing. His step changed into a more straight-legged Heil Hitler kind of step and suddenly turned about face in a precision move while he began the second melody of a medley. I'd say 10 minutes he huffed and puffed and blew the song out. We applauded from slightly afar. The insurance man disassembled his bagpipes, closed the trunk, and turned, walking back towards the beer tent. I shook his hand. Thank you, that was great. That's a first around here, Carolyn said. That was wonderful, truly. Well, thanks. I don't get to play them enough these days. We sat at the picnic table. Tell me again what this tent's worth? $10,000, Carolyn answered quickly. Her Cheshire cat had disappeared into a business look. We waited for him to speak. It was a while. He was writing to the end of a page and signed his name. Here, Carolyn, would you sign this and date it? She quickly signed. She kicked me gently under the table. I think I've got the sum of your claim. We will pay for the wind damage and lighting fixture and back of the big tent and send a check for $10,000 so you can replace the beer tent. Oh, that's right. This is called my big mouth. Be careful what you say from the stage. Show me an audience, my lips flap and slap at any hint of a joke that comes up the throat. Some mode of construction was going on at my house, and I had a dumpster delivered. My first dumpster. What a thrill. So, of course, I made some mention of it, telling the audience, hey, anybody out there got stuff you need dumped? I got a little room in my dumpster, bring it on over. You may or not know that the charge for a dumpster determined by the weight of your trash. A couple days later, I came home from rehearsal to find someone had indeed taken me up the offer. There atop my load were tracks from a bulldozer. I mean a two-speeded, treaded Caterpillar track, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Had to be of service. Somebody somewhere is still laughing, and so am I. Dateline Friday, June 15, 2000. On a soggy night, we all packed up and left the tent in a hurry after possibly the worst performance of Ride in the Wind ever. The band and crew to the man and woman were all in ugly moods before, after, and during the show. Maybe it was the weather. Maybe it was the grind of the schedule. Maybe it was all just in the clouds for us that night. I remember plopping myself on the couch at home and falling asleep to TV. Sometime past 3 in the morning, the phone rang. My answering machine took it since I was in the grog and fog. I mean, who calls her? She was crying and talking excitedly at the same time. The tent burned down. The tent burned. Carol later told me she didn't sleep well and was up when she heard a popping sound. She thought it was a light bulb breaking. Out the window, she saw a light, and at first thought it was one of the pole lights near the tent. The tent was on fire. It took me a staring minute or two to process what I just heard. I laid back down not knowing if I were dreaming. The phone rang again. It was Chris Aikford. Carol had called her thinking she could get the message to me. Chris repeated the message. I hung up the phone, lay back down, and went back to sleep. Within minutes, Chris was at my house. She drove me to the hill. We got there just as daylight arrived at the tent. Caroline was already there, as with Betty. Phil Lamich arrived, his boat hooked to the truck, getting ready to head out for a few days off. Carolyn told him to go on. There was nothing any of us could do. I had nothing to say to the ash-shard skeleton and to those who were standing stunned at the sight. The stage end had burned first. I walked through it. My first thought was, how do we mount the show schedule for that night? All else was only stuff, valuable stuff. We lost a complete visual backing Riding the Wind. Bruce Bowers lost his computer box full of programs to use for his violin. The Ojibwa flute that the late Walt Brissett gave me, the flute Mr. Bowers played, was gone. The beautiful podium, handmade and carved by Matt Schreider, burned. All that was left of the piano was the brass sounding board. Most of the pews survived, though seriously smoke damage. The Bayfield Fire Company had put the blaze out not long after it started. We canceled only one show, and the story is a loving tribute to the tent from the Chequamegon community. Waiting until 8 a.m. the start of business day, Carolyn called our insurance agent in Ashland, Terry Burns, who assured us our losses would be covered. We then had to wait for the fire marshal report before beginning the cleanup. Meanwhile, we kept back to the attack of the cause of doing incoming shows. The Bayfield School Gym came immediately to mind as temporary home for the shows. Indeed, Riding the Wind had first been performed there in 1985, so we knew the space. One show at Cheney and Mills was canceled. The next night we were back at it and finished a week's run in the tent. I'll tell you about that later. It was discovered that a mouse had chewed a junction box in the piano, and an electric spark charged the blaze. Insurance came quickly. The new old tent went up. It was a white vinyl big top, ugly in comparison, complete with bad sound, but it was ours, and we were back at it on the hill a week later. So much to read. Want to hear about Riding the Wind? Sure. Okay. The success of Riding the Wind in 1985 led to the founding of Chautauqua. I've often referred to it as the show that bought the tin. The name Bayfield is romance to all in Wisconsin and territories beyond. Picture postcard town, gateway to the Apostle Islands, place everybody would like to move to. The big doings that led to another show for the Nelson Ferris Concert Company was the All-School Jamboree in Bayfield in July 1985. A contract was with the Bayfield Heritage Association and the Apostle Islands Foundation for the Arts for $25,000, which was meant to cover all costs from beginning research to the creation and the rehearsals and 5-day performances. From beginning to end, the line items would include research, writing, film, and developing, office expenses, travel, and all fees for sound lights, and bringing Bruce Bowers in from California. Upon signing the contract, we began reading, knocking on doors of elders, extensively working in the museum of the Heritage Association, the basement of the National Park Service headquarters. Kate Lidford's Park Service historian guided us through the files. Those we have to thank for sharing Bayfield's lives include Ernie and Millie LaPointe, Marjorie Benton, Dawson Hauser, Grace Butler Nurse, Roger O'Malley, Bill Wheeler, Bill and Betty Hewling, Jerry and Mary Phillips, Dick Bodine, Jimmy Erickson, Mary Rice, and many more that we met out and about tracing the Bayfield Trail. I regret enormously we didn't sit down with Ed Erickson, Mr. Bayfield. Over the years following, I got to know Ed well. Born in Bayfield and raised on the lake, he had a dry wit and all the wet working story of his life on the big lake. The opening night performance of Riding the Wind was all we hoped for. The Bayfield Gym, hung with color spinnakers for sound and decoration, was packed. It's immensely rewarding to let new songs into the air for the first time when they rise, float, and fly and land safely. Most of the audience knew faces and could recognize hundreds of photos on the screen in the show. A gasp, squeal, or giggle broke out often, making the show their own. In the audience were Bill and Betty Hewlings, who thus first saw what we could do, and their love for us there. From the start, Riding the Wind was a center pole of Big Top Chautauqua, holding up the tent. For the first several years, it was common to see 700 people or more in the seats no matter what. It was Thursday or Saturday. There are dozens of people who have seen Riding the Wind dozens of times. Some over 50, someone just told me in the last performance. Jerry DePerry, a member of the Redcliffe tribe, strengthened Riding the Wind when he came on board. With his eagle feather in hand, he stepped to the stage to tell of the Anishinaabe migration following their guiding star of the mega shell. Jerry often left the trail of the story to ad-lib, which he still does, mostly at the expense of old you-know-who. Example, I showed up one night with laryngitis, couldn't sing. Sally said from the stage, "Jerry, maybe you should say a ojibwa prayer for Warren to recover his voice." Jerry said, "Let's just enjoy it." 30th Star, 1998. Wisconsin knows how to party. Knowing your state turns 150 years old, only every 150 years is great reason to. And so in 1998, she said, from the Illinois state line to Lake Superior, from St. Croix River to Green Bay, cut a rug. Unlike my home state of Minnesota, 10 years later, at their sesquicentennial, Wisconsin legislature recognized significance and budgeted $6 million to be distributed statewide for the year's revelry. It was helped considerably by the sesquicentennial license plates, which proved popular. State funds, as well as corporate sponsorship, supported celebrations involving cities, small towns, symphony orchestras, theaters, artists of all ilk, parades, lectures, discussion groups, in the spirit of the old license, you name it. And a new big show, Big Top Chautauqua. A man named Tony and Judge and I shook hands with the executive director of the sesquicentennial, Dean Amhouse, after a very successful meeting in Madison. He gave us $92,000 to start the process. Tony and I have been on the fundraising trail many times together. We had a song and dance down and made a great pair of closing time. I'd known Dean from his years as the executive director of the Wisconsin Arts Board. We always got along well together in the times we meet around the state. He was a great choice to hire the staff. It was another in line of Nelson Ferris Concert Company productions in cahoots with Big Top. Betty and I did what we learned to do together, bloodhounding Wisconsin stage stories, getting the script, songs, and visuals ready for arrangement and rehearsals. We dug extensively into the archives of the Wisconsin Historical Society. The show needs a name and I couldn't find it. Make It Home was a working title, but it just didn't have the juice. Dean Amhouse was eager to get a story out of our project, and he called a couple times, "Where's the name? Where's the name?" Came to me in a flash. Wisconsin was made a state in 1848. It was the 30th state to join the Union. There's a star on every U.S. flag for every state in the Union. The 30th star is Wisconsin, 30th star. I called Dean and told him. He took a deep, easy breath and said, "Yeah, I heard there was dancing in the office that day." Oh, just take a break? Let's take a break. Yeah, just tell me when to stop. Once again, morning shows for elementary school groups that are being bussed up from Washburn, Ashland, Red Cliff, Solon Springs, Superior, and Hurley. It is 8:30 a.m. for the band. That's a call. For musicians, an early call is dreaded, but it barely bothers me. I'm a morning man. Half the band, though, has the drip cheek zombie look when they step into the back of the tent. Laughter slowing begins to bubble out as they head to the caffeine. We're playing a cutting of 30th Star for the school shows and the full show tonight. Makes for a good paying day for the performers in this first week of September, the last week of the Chautauqua season. The air has the crisp, cool scent of the coming fall, red tipping the maple leaves, yellow popping out in the poplars. The pond, better known as Lake Superior, shows a different hue of blue come fall. This morning it's a flat sheet of water, perhaps resting up for November. I'm knowing a week from now I'll be lolling at Northland Lodge on Lost Man Lake by Hayward with nothing to do but fish, read, fish, read, fish, and fish. The end of every summer run on the hill is always bittersweet. I gaze at the Big Top with the two masks of drama. One has the wide smile, one the turn down frown. The wide smile wins. Unclip the ropes, ease down the poles, drop the top. It's time. The saving grace is knowing, God willing, that in a blink another summer will rise. The buses are arriving, fourth graders jumping out. Teachers herding them through the tent. Andy Noyes once described their landing as flocks of birds migrating in. The theater becomes an aviary. Andy was always in the audience running house sound, in the middle of it, hearing and seeing all. On 30th Star in Green Bay, at the Widener Center, 900 fourth graders were squirming and chirping in their seats at 9 a.m. show. We walked out to the high-pitched screams that never let up. Teachers were standing and giving the kids shh, but to no avail. I waved with one hand, they waved back. I waved with the other hand. I patted my stomach, they patted their stomach. I patted my stomach, and rubbed my head. all was suddenly quiet. I use that trick to this very day. What's better than this playing for kids? The buses pulled out, the band right behind. Carol and I talked in the sweet sunlight about the show order for old last night. The tent is empty. It's like a balloon just popped. There's another show at 1. In the school hour, I try to look at every young face from the stage as I sing the 30 Star Inn song. I wonder what they shall live on as they grow into the modern world. I think of how lucky I've been to be born in a less crowded time. I swear it was simpler at easier age to make a living way back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. The country was not as paved physically and spiritually. Singing for attention to the health of the planet is the top of the reason I sing. Anyway, what a day it was doing those school shows. It was just always so memorable. Now I have a chapter here called Jerry and Carol Carlson, and I want to have another round of applause from that. We've already heard that it was day 1, and every moment, like every day, I would get there early, and so here it is. We were great partners. Jerry and I said that to each other often. Since Jerry and Carol live on the hill, the big top is a tent put up in their backyard. Jerry has run the Mount Ashaway ski hill for who knows how long. I know he knows. The site is perfect for a Chautauqua private, a parking lot, flat ground to pitch a big top on, a bar, protection from wind, provided by the steep ski slope. On the first tent raising day in 1986, Jerry was the canvas man with handy guy knowledge that was needed regularly in the entire operation. He and Carol kept the grounds. Jerry was king of the hill on the tractor. Carol planted beautiful perennial flower gardens in front of the T-bar, decorating the evenings. Speaking of the T-bar and its concessions, it is Jerry and Carol's business, and they do it well. They got to know the in and outs, the ups and downs of handling a show night like we did. Both of us got better at running a smooth running operation. I think of how complicated the food service is, not knowing the numbers of the folks coming to the show. Advance ticket sale certainly is not an indicator, but who knows. Perhaps the most important memory of mine here is Jerry's parking lot and weather history of Chautauqua. Every night, Jerry counted the number of cars at intermission and took the temperature. He'd say, 323 cars tonight, and the temperature is 78 degrees. You could guess the attendance by the number of cars. You can figure on the average 2.5 people per car, Warren. Yeah, Jerry, 2.5 people. That's not a pretty sight. I write at the tent in the past tense. I have nothing but great memories of working with both of them. I miss seeing them on summer nights, every night during the week, and hanging out in the T-bar after the shows. So it went. Time goes. Okay, here's my poem about how to write a song. How to write a song. God whistles and I sit up. Songwriting class I can't do. How to explain? Well, I like to have a baseball game on the radio in the next room. I'll start paddling with the guitar in the rolling rivers of melody, fool around. Carry the canoe of song one portage at a time. A manual typewriter is best, the rhythm knot's there. How many have I just thrown it out the window and given to the wind? Memory begs later. Have a tape recorder ready. Just start and trust your own voice. When the high note breaks the window you've begun. Lyrics come in invisible spores. You breathe in and out, inspired, lick the page. If the seed takes, the verses will grow. All choruses need a hook, and you are the shepherd. Make sure only the day hears it first, otherwise it's jinxed. Wrangle the thing around. Watch for the smile or squinch when you bring it to someone else. Save the first draft. If it stays in the toes of your shoe, you got something to walk with. Sing it 3 days, and if it still holds water, it's a keeper. Don't call me. I have no idea. Okay, let's see here. Trying to find the story of, here we go. I think the first big act, board of directors, the first big money we paid, which is big then, now it's nothing, It's $3,500 to Taj Mahal. Is that right, Carolyn? I think that's right. $3,500 we're going to pay for a guy to come to the tent. Now it's like, oh, when I was still at the tent, B.B. King was $75,000, and I'm sure it's even more than up on the hill. But that was the board of directors just had that confidence in Carolyn and I to choose. But here's one called Johnny Cash and June Carter. Were you there? You were lucky. Because John died about a few months after he played the tent up in Michigan. Or at least he got sick and left the stage, and he died a year or so later. Guess who's coming to town? At a spring board meeting in 1997, I closed the agenda with my usual updates on the coming summer. Who's coming? What's up? Carolyn and I had a great secret we'd held until the moment. I opened with, well, I've never been so excited. On the third Tuesday and Wednesday in June, we were going to spend $30,000 a night. I know that's the most we've ever paid, but don't worry. All heads turned slowly towards me. I paused to build suspense. Ladies and gentlemen, Big Top Chautauqua is proud to present Johnny Cash and June Carter. I have never seen such instant wide grins of the board members. There was no doubt this was the coup for the Big Top. The setup for a show like this is a sight to see as a venue the size of ours compared to major arenas. Johnny's troupe asked for local volunteer wannabe roadies to help unload the semi. In come the amp racks, drum kit, instruments, sometimes their own soundboard. In Cash's show, his longtime piano player, Earl the Pearl, Poolball, traveled with his own white grand piano. Gary Schlichting, our piano tuner, was ready when it rolled into the place. Sidewalls were tied up at stage left, ramp folded out, stage set. There was a problem on the big day. It was pouring rain. The top soaked and it was leaking over the stage. Rain, rain, go away, I prayed to the tent show gods. Dreaded thought began to rise that it is possible if it continues, the show will be canceled. Johnny's personal manager, Lou Robbins, doesn't say yes, but the crew looked at the water dripping on the stage near the electrical cords, amps, and mics. We are, of course, sold out most nights. We do not want to deal with refunds and giving Johnny Cash $60,000 to leave town. Another miracle, about an hour before the show, the rain began to let up, and then it stopped entirely. My prayers were answered. Any questions of anybody that wants to? I know you all have your own histories of Chautauqua going up there from all those years, driving up there. I figured I played over 1,000 shows in my 23 years, or at least went up there emceeing and doing 1,000 shows. Let's talk about it last night. Have you been to one lately? We used to, in the old days, Jerry Carlson would build a teepee of a big bonfire, and we start the show at 8:50, and of course, old circus time. And then we played about 3 or 4 or 5 sets till about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, sets that were planned out. And of course, everybody that lined up to sing at the beginning of the evening got a big round of applause, so they stay around for an encore. So the poor saps like me who supposed to play at midnight were playing at 2:30 a.m. But as the time went by, Jerry and Carol made lots of food, and the hours went by, and pretty soon it was dawn, and then all what we call the survivors stood on a trailer, and Don Albrecht, rest his sweet soul, came to take a picture of the survivors, which was printed in the paper brochure the next year. Oh, let's see here. I'm looking. Keep It Alive, 1989. For the 200th anniversary of the United States Lighthouse Service, 3 sites nationally were chosen to hold celebrations. The Point Judith Lighthouse in Narragansett, Rhode Island, a California Pacific Coast Light, and the Apostle Islands Light in Lake Superior. Historian Dave Snyder of the Apostle Islands National Lake Shore was at the tent one evening and approached me about creating a show. The Nelson Ferris Concert Company was back in business, funding going through the Big Top Chautauqua. The collections of the Park Service in Bayfield were made available, providing almost everything we needed to research the show. Joy in this one was boating to the lighthouses of the apostles, walking through the residence quarters and climbing the towers. For the August celebration, people arrived in Bayfield from all over the country. Lighthouse enthusiasts, lake lovers, kin of keepers who had once attended one or more of the lights. Excursion trips boated crowds out among the islands. A trip to Outer Island was a spectacular. Children and grandchildren of former Outer Island keepers were among those aboard, telling their young lives of the lights. The boat was abuzz. I met a 19-year-old young man who had come all the way from San Francisco. I inquired, "Are you a grandson of a lightkeeper?" "No," he said. "I'm a lightkeeper. I was just born 100 years too late." I used those lines in the script of the show. When we rounded the point and the Outer Island Tower came in sight, the crowd became hypnotized and still. More than a few eyes misted over. The images Betty and I collected were fabulous. Keeper of the Light was the first show we presented that was a musical theater piece. All the characters were dressed in authentic costumes and speaking lines and songs were memorized. It was the first time I had put my hand to writing for theater. I was pacing backstage when the first laugh flew out of the audience. For the first time in my life, I felt like a playwright. Parts of the script came out of the Lightkeeper's journals. The set was ruled by a recreation of the tower top. Noel Meyer's design for lighting was superb, as was the work of stagehands changing sets and running the big shows. 3 years later, when we reminded the show, Dennis McCann, travel writer for the Milwaukee Journal, reviewed it. To this day, it's the best description I've ever had for one of our shows. And I have to tell you a wonderful story. After Keeper of the Light, I was standing outside the tent, and there were members of the Coast Guard who were there. And they said, "Warren, boy, we love the show that you and Betty put together and your whole troupe performed, and I want to invite you out a couple days from now with us in our Coast Guard boat to Devil's Island to remove the last remaining Fresnel lens." What? I said, "What?" Anyway, I told this to my partner, Betty Ferris. If you know Betty, it sunk in. We soon we talked amongst ourselves, including with Janet Bewley, and we became 3 people who decided to initiate a lawsuit against the United States Coast Guard. And the verdict was to be, the trial was to be, or the hearing was to be done in Madison. And we knew we might lose, and God bless her, Mary Rice guaranteed that she would pay the legal fees. So we sued the United States Coast Guard for removing a light from a local place that is important in history, and we won. The lens was taken, the Fresnel lens was taken to Detroit. It was partially injured. Part of the glass was chipped and broken. But what was our lawyer friend our judge? Barbara Crabb in Madison ruled in our favor. And the Coast Guard had to go to Detroit and pick up the lens and bring it back and put it back in the Devil's Tower where it stands to this day. I want to have Otis come up now because we're going to, you hear Otis? Yes. So we're going to do a couple songs, and I'm going to read one more thing, and then we'll do a couple songs. And I want to thank you once again for coming tonight. I lost my 10 show. Some of you guys know why, and I miss it every day. But it's just been 23 years of my life that was just the best, and I'm still a man of the cloth. Summer Bowl in the key of E.
For those of you singing along.
When I was talking to Jerry and Carol during the intermission, Carol was talking about last night and how they did all the food. And anyway, she was picking up the garbage and picking up afterwards. And it was, I don't know, probably 7:30 in the morning. And she heard this really ugly kind of sound. But she didn't know where it's coming from, and it ended up being me in the front pew snoring. I dedicate this to Carol and Steve, with me from the start. We never charged extra for the Northern Lights in the show, afterglow, or the pure view of the summer stars, or for the appearance of the occasional bear that was seen before the show grazing wild strawberries in the ski slope grass. As Iris DeMent spoke from the piano, I hope they reserved a seat for the bear. In nights with the sidewalls open and folks in the chairs, gin and tonic in hand, I took my stance leaning against the front side entrance side pole and watched the audience lit by stage lights and gazing into the dark back end up at the big blue top hovering in its circus hangover all. It was always astounding when the artists would amble to the concession stand after the show to sign CDs and meet and greet wide-eyed showgoers, Earl Scruggs, the Del McCurry Band, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, Judy Collins, Mason Williams, Willie Nelson, Garrison Keillor. One dude, when Willie Nelson came, he was signing autographs for 2 hours after the show, and one dude had him sign his pickup truck in permanent ink. Probably never washed his truck again. Or John Hartford walking over to a fire my brother and his pals had lit away to the woodside, his derby hat cocked in the Hartford attitude. It was unreal to be so close to the stars, under and over the canvas. I never tired of it. The night slipped away as the cars drove out under the Mount Ashley portal. Therese had locked up the merchandise shelves, the food and brew crew clothes shop. Carolyn finished paying off the performers. The last of the T-bar sippers headed to their cars. The very last of us sitting at the picnic tables in the dark. And then, almost every night, there was only me left. I'd stare at the tent, looming like a great ship tied up for the night. The Big Dipper pouring an eternity into the moment. Laugh, oh yes, to myself, satisfied. On the way to my car in the back lot, I'd first walk around the tent, patting the canvas. Oh yeah, cheek to cheek. Kiss it. And unclasp the back entrance and stare at the emptied hole. Sit at the bleachers with the ghost of the crowd. Where my favorite moment was, I would step into the empty tent, stand on the stage, amazed at my working place. And I would say to nobody, ladies and gentlemen, wide awake citizens, welcome to Big Top Chautauqua. Like, you know, people that you wouldn't see for another year. Oh, the monarch is up on the butterfly, migrating back to old Mexico. Clouds of the call is flickering by. He's in the window whispering, I will say so long to you. Before we do see each other again on the common ground, I wish you well and all. Summer road Carlson will be here doing a program on the history of Olson's Dray Line and Lumberyard, not too far from now. You want to make sure you do that one, except that one's $60 a ticket, because that's the special one.
You got it again.
Freestanding.
Well, welcome everybody here to our final session of the Historic Festival of the 7th Annual Tony Wyatt History. Oh,
The mic isn't on.
okay, I'll get close here. So welcome to the final summer session of the 7th Annual Tony Wyatt History Festival. And this is sponsored by the Washburn Heritage Association and the Washburn Area Historical Society. Here's big thankful to the Apostle Islands Historic Preservation Conservancy, who's funding this summer series. We're delighted to have musician Warren Nelson here for this evening. Thank you to Ken and Jane Weiler, who are sponsoring his music. There'll also be a 10-minute intermission. It's about halfway through here, when you can get up and move around, get a drink and some of the refreshments. And also, if you haven't filled out it's the survey, please take the time to do so if you haven't. Okay, we're excited to have Warren Nelson here. This week, Warren has been here since, I think they came in 1980, and they established Chautauqua. And one of their first songs was Souvenir Views. Yeah. So, but I'll read here. Let's see. Lake Superior Big Top Chautauqua founder, impresario, and host Warren Nelson brings to the stage his 23 years of being top hat of this Wisconsin treasure tent show, where his wit,